Substantial majorities of Illinois voters favor legalizing cannabis. Pat McNeely, why do you oppose it?
Well, I think you have a number of problems with regard to cannabis, and first and foremost being the health effects. So the CDC recently came out with a study, and what they said was that if you have recently used cannabis, you're more than 3 times as likely to initiate heroin use. You got the National Academy of Sciences, and there's a bunch of apocryphal science out there with regard to, you know, the medicinal qualities of cannabis. A lot of people say you can use it to treat morning sickness, which is insane. A lot of people think that you can use it to treat things like cancer, but what the National Academy of Sciences did is they did a meta-analysis, okay, of all of the studies that related to the medical uses of cannabis, and they found only 3 uses medicinally: treat long-term pain, to treat chemotherapy, to treat patients with nausea as a result of chemotherapy, and to help with sleep outcomes for people suffering from diseases like Parkinson's.
But alcohol does more health damage than marijuana or cannabis.
Right, but
so why don't we outlaw alcohol then?
So I guess I think that's a bad argument, and the reason why I think that's a bad argument is people will say to me, you know, Pat, alcohol causes cirrhosis of the liver and disease, and alcohol breaks up families, and alcohol
is a DUI,
and alcohol causes crime and DUI and death on the roadway. Let's get more of that. That's not an argument that really makes sense to me.
But for the same reason that we don't abolish alcohol, we tried. It was a spectacular failure.
Alcohol is not similarly situated to cannabis, and what I mean by that is alcohol has been in common use for 200 years in Illinois, with the exception of prohibition.
Now, the estimate is 800,000 Illinoisans are using it on a regular basis right now.
Using cannabis on a regular basis? Okay, well, there's 13 million people in Illinois, so that's less than 10% of the population. How many of those people are using alcohol? And if we recognize, as the American Medical Association did, that cannabis is a dangerous drug, I'd rather have 800,000 people regularly using cannabis now than 5 million or 8 million or 10 million, because it's going to undermine people's health. It's going to increase risks to people on the roadways, and it's going to have a whole host of consequences, including increased violent crime, which I'm happy to talk about.
Okay, well, you know, the argument is if marijuana is outlawed, only outlaws will use marijuana.
The reason why I oppose it is because bad things are going to happen, especially if you relate to the experience of Colorado. You look at what's going on in Colorado. Violent crime has increased 25% in Colorado. The rest of the country, it's increased only 0.3%. The reason why that's happening, Mike, is because cartels are moving in. You create a permissive legal and cultural atmosphere, and cartels can move in, hide in plain sight. And they're selling to a black market within Colorado. You got to remember, they're taxing marijuana in Colorado considerably. If you can undercut that price, you have a customer base. But in addition to that, they're using Colorado as a base of operations to ship cannabis out. And that may very well be what they decide to do in Illinois.
Well, Illinois has been a transshipment point in the Chicago area specifically for the Sinaloa cartel for years.
They already have the infrastructure set up.
The DEA did a study estimating 80% of the marijuana on the street here comes from and is brought in by the Sinaloa cartel. Do you think that's accurate? Because part of the pro-legalization argument is we would rob that, we'd take that cash away from the current Al Capones by legalizing it.
You wouldn't take it. You wouldn't take it away. All that they would be doing is setting up bases of operations in Illinois if what we've seen in Colorado happens here. So instead of growing cannabis in places
here, according to the DEA.
Well, they're going to set up more. I mean, the idea is they're going to set up more, and they don't have production in Illinois. They're not growing cannabis to the extent that they otherwise would should cannabis be legalized in Illinois. So while I understand they have distribution, they don't have production.
Do you think you'll be able to stop this in 2019?
I don't know. What I'm trying to encourage is people to be speculative of this. To me, the whole notion that we have so mismanaged our state's finances that we need to sell drugs to our citizens in order to make up losses, when we have very good reasons to think that by doing so we're going to increase crime, we're going to increase the rate of people dying on the highways, and when we do, and knowing that these types of drugs affect the most vulnerable populations in Illinois, I think that that's morally problematic, and I think that's unseemly.
So the argument's made that with an estimated 800,000, maybe the number's a little higher, a little lower, using it on a regular basis right now in Illinois, that we ought to just take, I mean, that's a large retail business that's on the black market right now. Let's bring it out into the open, tax it, let people get legitimate jobs, take it away from the cartels. Maybe we'd somehow control where it's grown, and the cartels wouldn't come in, as you're saying. I mean, is there a way to do that?
There may be. I mean, to me, you should take a financial incentive to the state out of the question entirely. So if the idea is that this is a social justice issue, and you don't want people to have their lives ruined because of cannabis possession or trafficking in small amounts of cannabis, well, then you have the route of decriminalization of it. And while I understand,
we've already followed, right? Because possession of a small amount.
Yeah, but you can do more. Okay, so what we've decriminalized is 10 grams, which is like a sandwich bag. You could go to 30 grams, which is about an ounce. And in addition to that, if you want to have a proportional response to the harm that you think cannabis is going to cause, then do that. Make it more akin to a traffic ticket. But don't tell me that it's not harmful. Don't tell me that people aren't going to get hurt as a result of legalization. And don't tell me that use is not going to go up. And I'll say one more thing. One of the things that the National Academy of Sciences said was that was that cannabis use increases the risk of other substance abuse issues related to things like alcohol, related to things like opioids. So for so long we hear from these marijuana advocates that, hey, look, well, let's legalize cannabis and people won't drink alcohol and people won't use opioids. Turns out that's not true. I come from McHenry County that's had an enormous problem with opioids. The idea of marijuana legalization forging a broader path to opioid abuse in McHenry County, to me, is chilling, especially in view of the fact that I watched 78 people in my county die last year of an opioid overdose.
All right. Patrick Kenneally, the Republican State's Attorney from McHenry County, thanks for joining us.